The morning alarm buzzed through the dormitory halls of Nexus Prime Academy, the most prestigious interspecies educational institution in the galaxy. Students from dozens of worlds shuffled through the corridors, their various forms creating a living rainbow of alien diversity. Among them walked Sarah Chen, a human girl who seemed utterly unremarkable by any standard. Her black hair was tied in a simple ponytail, and her clothes were the standard academy uniform that everyone wore. She carried her books quietly, never speaking unless spoken to, and had maintained perfect attendance for 3 years without anyone really noticing her presence. To her classmates, she was just another human exchange student, one of the few from the recently discovered Earth. The Galactic Federation had only made contact with Earth 15 years ago, and humans were still considered a primitive species by most standards. They lacked the telepathic abilities of the Zephyrians, the incredible strength of the Corvan warriors, or the technological mastery of the silicon-based Nexari. Humans were tolerated in the academy more as a curiosity than as equals. "Watch where you're going, dirt dweller," snarled Vextar, a massive Corvan whose scales gleamed purple-black in the artificial sunlight streaming through the academy's biodome ceiling. He had deliberately bumped into Sarah as she made her way to advanced quantum mechanics class. Sarah simply stepped aside and continued walking, her expression unchanged. This was typical behavior from her. The other students had learned to expect nothing more than polite silence from the quiet human girl. She never fought back, never complained, and never caused trouble. "Pathetic," muttered Zix, a Zephyrian whose crystalline features sparkled with contempt. "I don't know why they even let humans into the academy. They can barely understand basic fusion theory, let alone contribute anything meaningful to galactic civilization." Dr. Calaxis, their advanced combat theory instructor, was a veteran Nexari whose metallic form had seen countless battles across the galaxy. His optical sensors swept across the classroom as students filed in for what everyone knew would be a practical demonstration day. "Today, we will examine defensive strategies employed by various species," Dr. Calaxis announced, his voice carrying the electronic undertone common to his kind. "We will conduct sparring matches to observe different fighting styles and natural abilities." The class buzzed with excitement. Combat demonstrations were always popular, especially among the more aggressive species. Students began pairing off, eager to show their skills. "Miss Chen," Dr. Calaxis's attention turned to Sarah, who was sitting quietly in the back corner as usual. "You will pair with Vexitar for today's demonstration." A collective gasp went through the classroom. Vexitar was not just large and strong, he was the Academy's heavyweight combat champion. His species was bred for warfare, with natural armor plating and strength that could crush most materials. Pairing him with a small human seemed less like education and more like execution. "Professor, perhaps we should reconsider," suggested Lyra, an Aquarian whose translucent blue skin rippled with concern. "Humans are known for their fragility. This seems unwise." Dr. Calaxis's optical array focused on Lyra. "The purpose of this exercise is educational. We must understand the capabilities and limitations of all species if we are to work together effectively in the Federation." Vextar cracked his massive knuckles, each one producing a sound like breaking stone. "I'll try to be gentle with the little human," he said with a laugh that sounded like grinding metal. "Wouldn't want to break Earth's only representative on the first hit." Sarah stood up slowly and walked to the center of the practice area. The combat zone was a circular platform surrounded by energy barriers designed to contain the fight and protect observers. As she stepped into the ring, her classmates pressed closer to the barriers, some recording with their personal devices, expecting to witness a very short and one-sided demonstration. "Standard combat rules apply," Dr. Calaxis announced. "The match ends when one participant yields, is rendered unconscious, or I determine the fight should stop. Begin when ready." Vextar rolled his massive shoulders and assumed a combat stance that his species had perfected over millennia. His people had conquered 17 star systems through pure physical might, and he carried that legacy in every movement. Sarah simply stood there, her hands at her sides, looking almost bored. She showed no signs of fear, no aggressive posturing, nothing that indicated she had any idea what she was facing. "This is going to be over in seconds," whispered Keith, a reptilian saurian whose forked tongue flicked nervously. "I've seen Vextar punch through reinforced titanium plating. The poor human probably doesn't even know how to fight," added another student. "Her species only recently developed space travel. They're barely above primitive." Vexitar began to circle Sarah like a predator stalking wounded prey. His footsteps made the platform vibrate slightly with each step. "You know, little human, you can yield now and save yourself some pain. I promise I'll make it quick." Sarah turned her head slightly to track his movement, but otherwise remained perfectly still. Her breathing was calm and steady, as if she were sitting in meditation rather than facing a creature that could literally tear her apart. "Your funeral," Vextar growled, and launched himself forward with frightening speed. For a creature weighing over 400 pounds, Vextar moved with surprising agility. His charge would have been devastating to most opponents, designed to overwhelm them with pure momentum before they could react. His massive fists came forward in a double strike that would have pulverized a normal human on impact. What happened next took place so quickly that most observers needed to replay their recordings to understand what they had witnessed. Sarah moved. It wasn't the desperate dodge of a panicked victim or the clumsy stumble of someone overwhelmed by superior force. She flowed like water, her entire body shifting with perfect economy of motion. She slipped past Vextar's charge with millimeters to spare, her hand touching his shoulder so lightly it seemed almost gentle. Vextar crashed into the energy barrier behind where Sarah had been standing, his momentum carrying him forward even as he realized his target was no longer there. But something was wrong. As he tried to turn around, he found his right arm wasn't responding properly. "What did you do?" he demanded, spinning to face Sarah, who had somehow ended up behind him. Sarah said nothing. She had returned to her original position, hands at her sides, expression unchanged. The Corvan flexed his right arm experimentally and found it functioning again, though there had been a moment of complete numbness. He shook his head, convinced it must have been a coincidence. "Lucky dodge, human. But you can't run forever." This time, Vextar approached more cautiously. He threw a series of measured punches, each one capable of shattering bone, testing Sarah's defenses and looking for an opening. Sarah avoided each attack with minimal movement, never seeming hurried or stressed. She would lean slightly left to avoid a right cross, step back just enough to let an uppercut pass in front of her face, or duck under a hook with perfect timing. "How is she doing that?" whispered Zix, her crystalline features flickering with confusion. "Humans don't have enhanced reflexes or precognitive abilities." "Maybe she's just lucky," suggested another student, though doubt colored their voice. Dr. Calaxis's optical sensors were focused intently on the match, recording every movement and analyzing the data streams in real time. Something about the human's movement patterns was familiar, though he couldn't immediately place why. Vextar was becoming frustrated. None of his attacks were connecting, and worse, he was starting to breathe heavily while the human appeared completely relaxed. His species prided itself on endurance, but chasing an opponent who seemed to anticipate his every move was more exhausting than he had expected. "Stand still and fight like a warrior," he roared, throwing a wild haymaker that had enough force behind it to dent starship hull plating. Sarah finally moved aggressively. She stepped inside Vextar's overextended punch, her small frame moving past his massive fist. Her hand touched his wrist as she passed, and suddenly Vextar found his entire arm going numb from the shoulder down. Before he could process what had happened, Sarah was behind him again. This time her fingers found a point along his spine, pressing gently for just an instant. Vextar's legs buckled. The mighty Corvin warrior, champion of his homeworld and terror of the Academy's combat rings, dropped to one knee as his nervous system sent confused signals throughout his body. "Impossible," he gasped, trying to force his body to respond. "What kind of human are you?" Sarah finally spoke, her voice quiet but carrying clearly across the suddenly silent classroom. "Just a regular one." The numbness was already fading from Vextar's limbs, but the psychological impact was devastating. In less than 30 seconds, a small human girl had reduced him to helplessness without throwing a single punch or showing any sign of strain. "The match is concluded," Dr. Calaxis announced, though his electronic voice carried notes of surprise that his programming shouldn't have allowed. As Vextar struggled to his feet, his pride wounded far more than his body, the other students stared at Sarah in shock. She had returned to her usual position, hands at her sides, looking as unremarkable as ever. "That was just pressure point manipulation," she explained calmly when Dr. Calaxis gestured for an explanation. "Temporary disruption of nervous system function. It wears off quickly." "Where did you learn such techniques?" the professor asked. Sarah shrugged. "Basic human anatomy class. Everyone learns it." This was, of course, not true. What Sarah had demonstrated required years of training and an intimate understanding of alien physiology that should have been impossible for a human student to possess. But she delivered the lie with such casual confidence that some students actually believed her. Vextar was staring at Sarah with a mixture of respect and confusion. "I've fought warriors from across the galaxy, human. That wasn't just anatomy class." "Maybe Corvin anatomy is simpler than you think," Sarah replied with a slight smile. The rest of the class passed in relative quiet. Other sparring matches continued, but everyone's attention kept drifting back to Sarah, who had resumed her usual behavior of sitting quietly and taking notes. When the session ended, students filed out in small groups, all discussing what they had witnessed. Several had recorded the fight and were sharing the footage with friends who hadn't been present. "Did you see how fast she moved? The human took down Vextar without breaking a sweat." "I heard humans were primitive, but that was incredible." Dr. Calaxis remained behind, reviewing his sensor data from the match. The movement patterns he had observed were troubling him. They reminded him of something from his military service, but the connection seemed impossible. As Sarah packed her books, preparing to leave for her next class, the professor called out to her. "Miss Chen, a moment, please." Sarah approached his desk, her expression politely attentive. "Your fighting technique is quite advanced for someone who claims to have learned it in basic anatomy class," Dr. Calaxis observed. "I'm a quick learner," Sarah replied simply. "Indeed. Tell me, what region of Earth are you from?" "California. It's a western province of the North American Federation." Dr. Calaxis's optical array whirred as he processed this information. "And your family? What do they do?" "My parents are teachers." "Pretty boring stuff, really." The Nexari professor studied her for a long moment. "I see. Well, that was an impressive demonstration today. I hope you'll continue to participate actively in future classes." "Of course, Professor. Is there anything else?" "No, you may go." Sarah bowed slightly, a gesture of respect common in human culture, and left the classroom. Dr. Calaxis remained alone, staring at the combat platform where a small human girl had just defeated one of the Academy's most formidable fighters using techniques that shouldn't exist outside of military special operations. Meanwhile, in the hallways, the story of Sarah's victory was spreading like wildfire. Students who had never paid attention to the quiet human girl were suddenly very interested in learning more about her. The fight recording was being shared across the Academy's networks, reaching students in other years and even some faculty members. But Sarah herself seemed oblivious to the attention. She attended her next class, Advanced Stellar Cartography, and sat in her usual back corner seat. When other students tried to engage her in conversation about the fight, she politely deflected their questions and returned to her studies. "That was amazing what you did to Vextar," Lyra said during lunch break, sliding her tray across from Sarah in the cafeteria. "I've never seen anything like it." "He's probably just not used to fighting smaller opponents," Sarah replied, not looking up from her meal. "But the way you moved, it was like you knew exactly what he was going to do before he did it." Sarah finally looked up, meeting Lyra's translucent blue eyes. "Fighting is mostly about patterns and timing. Once you understand how someone moves, it's easier to avoid getting hit." "Is that something all humans learn?" "Some of us." The non-answer was typical of Sarah's communication style. She was always polite and responsive, but somehow managed to avoid actually revealing any information about herself. As word of the fight spread, it reached the attention of Academy administrators and eventually the Galactic Federation's Education Council. A small human girl defeating a Corvan warrior was the kind of story that traveled fast through diplomatic channels. On Earth, in a nondescript office building in Virginia, a middle-aged man in a plain suit received a priority communication. He read the report twice, then made a secure call. "Sir, we have a situation at Nexus Prime Academy. Chen's cover may be compromised. Details. She was forced into a combat demonstration. The opponent was a Corvan. She won." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "How badly did she win?" "Completely. Pressure point strikes, nervous system disruption, minimal contact, textbook special operations technique." "Damn, how much attention is this getting?" "The fight was recorded. It's spreading through student networks now. We estimate it will reach faculty and administration within hours." "Understood. Maintain surveillance. Do not extract unless absolutely necessary. Chen knows the protocols." "Yes, sir." The call ended, leaving the man staring at the report. Sarah Chen wasn't just another exchange student. She was one of Earth's most promising intelligence operatives, placed at the Academy to gather information about Federation military capabilities and potential threats to Earth. What her handlers hadn't anticipated was being forced into a situation where she would have to reveal her training. Now the careful cover identity they had built for her over 3 years was at risk. At the Academy, Sarah was well aware of the attention her victory had generated. She could see students pointing at her in the hallways, hear whispered conversations that stopped when she approached, and noticed the subtle changes in how faculty members looked at her. She had hoped to complete her mission without incident, gathering intelligence quietly while maintaining her cover as an unremarkable human student. Now she would have to adapt to a new situation where she had become the center of attention. That evening, in the privacy of her dormitory room, Sarah activated a small communication device hidden in what appeared to be a standard homework tablet. "Control, this is Sparrow. We have a problem." "We're aware, Sparrow. Your combat demonstration has created quite a stir." "Requesting instructions. My cover identity is compromised." "Negative on extraction. Your mission is too important to abort now. Adapt and continue." "Understood. How do you want me to handle the attention?" "Deflect and misdirect. You're just a human who got lucky. Let them underestimate your species while you continue gathering intelligence." "Copy that, Control. Sparrow out." Sarah deactivated the device and sat back on her bed, thinking about how to proceed. She had spent 3 years carefully building an identity as a forgettable human student. Now she would have to rebuild that identity as a human student who had some basic fighting skills but was still fundamentally harmless. The irony wasn't lost on her. The Galactic Federation considered humans primitive and weak, never suspecting that Earth's newest member species might be actively gathering intelligence about their military capabilities. They saw humans as barely evolved apes who had stumbled into space travel through luck rather than capability. If they knew the truth about human military doctrine, about the training programs that had produced operatives like Sarah, about Earth's rapidly developing weapons technology, the Federation's attitude toward humanity would change dramatically. But for now, Sarah's job was to maintain the illusion while learning everything she could about potential threats to her homeworld. As she prepared for sleep, Sarah reviewed the events of the day. The fight with Vexitar had been a setback, but it might also provide opportunities. Students who had previously ignored her were now interested in talking to her. Faculty members were paying attention to her performance. If she played this correctly, she might actually gain better access to the information she needed. The next few days would be crucial. Sarah would need to balance appearing impressive enough to maintain interest while not revealing the full extent of her capabilities. She would need to seem human enough to avoid suspicion while skilled enough to justify her victory over Vexitar. It was a delicate balancing act, but Sarah had been trained for exactly these kinds of situations. She was about to discover just how challenging it would be to maintain when the recording of her fight reached people who knew far more about combat than her fellow students. 3 days after the fight, Sarah's carefully maintained routine was disrupted by an unexpected visitor. She was returning from her morning advanced physics class when she found Commander Thaxion waiting outside her dormitory room. The Altarian officer was unmistakable even in civilian clothes. His tall, lean frame carried the rigid posture of military training, and his silver-blue skin bore the ritual scars that marked him as a veteran of the border wars. More concerning for Sarah was the intelligence in his amber eyes as they studied her approach. "Miss Chen," he said, in accented Standard Galactic. "I wonder if we might have a conversation." Sarah kept her expression neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in her mind. Altarians were known throughout the galaxy for their analytical minds and their service in Federation intelligence. This was exactly the kind of attention she had hoped to avoid. "Of course, Commander, though I'm not sure what I could tell you that would be of interest." "Oh, I think you might be surprised," Thaxion replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps we could speak privately?" Sarah's room was small, but comfortable, designed to accommodate a variety of alien physiologies. As Thaxion settled into a chair that adjusted automatically to his frame, Sarah noticed he positioned himself where he could see both her and the door, another sign of military training. "I've been reviewing the recording of your combat demonstration," he began without preamble. "Quite impressive for someone with no formal training." "I was lucky," Sarah replied, sitting on her bed and maintaining eye contact. "Vexitar underestimated humans. It won't happen again." Thaxion pulled up a holographic display from his wrist device. The fight played out in miniature above his palm, showing Sarah's movements in slow motion. "This sequence here, where you disable his arm. The pressure point you targeted is not commonly known outside of military circles. I studied anatomy extensively before coming to the academy. Human medicine requires detailed knowledge of nervous systems." "Indeed. And this movement pattern?" He isolated another sequence, showing Sarah's evasion techniques. "The way you maintain balance while changing direction. It reminds me of training I received in special operations." Sarah forced herself to look puzzled rather than alarmed. "I don't know anything about military training, Commander. I grew up on a farm in California. My parents grow oranges." "Oranges," Thaxion repeated thoughtfully. "Fascinating fruit. Tell me, what part of your agricultural upbringing taught you to recognize and exploit weaknesses in Corvan physiology?" The question was a trap, and Sarah knew it. She had made the mistake of assuming alien anatomy would be similar enough to human anatomy that her training would apply universally. In reality, what she had done required specific knowledge of how Corvan nervous systems functioned. "I noticed Vexitar favored his right side when he moved," she said carefully. "When he overextended, his left side was unprotected. I just got lucky with where I hit him." "Lucky," Thaxion mused. "You know, Miss Chen, I've spent the better part of 20 years studying combat techniques across the galaxy. In my experience, luck tends to favor the prepared." Before Sarah could respond, there was a chime from her door. She opened it to find Dr. Calaxis waiting outside, his optical array focused intently on the room's occupants. "Professor," Sarah said, stepping aside to let the Nexari enter, "I didn't know you were coming by." "Commander Thaxion requested my presence," Dr. Calaxis replied, his electronic voice carrying subtle harmonics of suspicion. "He wanted to discuss your performance in my class." Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. Having one suspicious intelligence officer was manageable. Having both a military analyst and a combat instructor examining her performance was far more dangerous. "Please sit," Thaxion gestured to another chair. "Dr. Calaxis, you've had Miss Chen in your classes for 3 years. Have you noticed anything unusual about her capabilities?" "Until recently, no," the professor replied honestly. "Miss Chen was an exemplary student but unremarkable in practical applications. Her performance against Vexitar was unexpected." "How so?" "The techniques she employed were highly advanced. Pressure point manipulation requires not just knowledge of anatomy, but understanding of how different species' nervous systems respond to specific stimuli. The precision required is extraordinary." Sarah maintained her composure while her mind raced through possible responses. She needed to deflect suspicion without completely discounting her abilities, since the fight had already been recorded and analyzed. "I spent a lot of time studying before coming here," she said. "Earth has extensive databases on galactic species. I thought it would be helpful to understand the physiology of my classmates." "Databases," Thaxion noted. "Interesting. Most species guard detailed physiological information quite carefully. I'm curious how Earth obtained such comprehensive data." This was dangerous territory. Sarah knew that Earth's intelligence services had indeed compiled detailed files on galactic species, but that information was highly classified and definitely not available to agricultural students. "The Federation provided educational materials when Earth joined," she improvised. "Cultural exchange programs included basic biological information about member species." "I see." Thaxion's expression suggested he didn't see at all, at least not in the way Sarah hoped. "Dr. Calaxis, in your professional opinion, could someone learn these techniques from educational materials?" "Theoretically possible, but highly unlikely," the professor replied. "The practical application requires extensive training. Knowing where to strike and actually being able to do so under combat conditions are very different things." "Yet Miss Chen managed it on her first attempt." "So it would seem." Sarah could sense the conversation moving in a direction she couldn't control. Both aliens were intelligent professionals who had noticed inconsistencies in her story. She needed to redirect their attention before they started asking questions she couldn't answer. "I don't understand why this is such a big deal," she said, allowing some frustration to creep into her voice. "I got lucky in one fight. It's not like I defeated the entire Corvan military." "No," Thaxion agreed. "But you defeated Vexitar using techniques that suggest training far beyond what any human should possess. That raises interesting questions about what else humans might be capable of." The comment hit closer to home than Sarah liked. This was exactly the kind of attention Earth's intelligence services wanted to avoid. If the Federation began seriously investigating human capabilities, they might discover things that would drastically alter the balance of power in the galaxy. "Commander, with respect," "You're overthinking this," Sarah said. Humans are exactly what we appear to be. We're new to galactic civilization, we're learning as fast as we can, and sometimes we get lucky. That's all there is to it. Perhaps, Thaxion said, but his tone suggested he remained unconvinced. Dr. Calaxis had been running additional sensor scans while they talked. Miss Chen, would you be willing to demonstrate some of these techniques under controlled conditions? For educational purposes, of course. Sarah's training kicked in. When faced with a situation you couldn't avoid, control it as much as possible. I suppose that would be all right, she said reluctantly. But I should warn you, I'm not really sure how I did what I did. It might have been a fluke. Understood. We'll arrange something simple. Perhaps another sparring match. But with full sensor coverage this time. As the two officials prepared to leave, Thaxion paused at the door. Miss Chen, one more question. Are there many humans like you on Earth? The question was casual, but Sarah recognized it as anything but. This was exactly what he had come here to determine. Like me, how? She asked, capable of surprising a Corvan warrior in single combat. Sarah laughed, and the sound was genuinely amused. Commander, I'm probably the least impressive human you'll ever meet. If you think I'm remarkable, you'd be amazed by what some humans can do. It was a calculated response, dismissive enough to deflect attention from herself while hinting that other humans might be even more capable. If Thaxion wanted to investigate human abilities, better he focus on hypothetical superhumans than on her specifically. After they left, Sarah activated her hidden communicator again. Control, this is Sparrow. We have a bigger problem. Report. Federation intelligence is sniffing around. Commander Thaxion, Altarian military intelligence. He's asking pointed questions about human capabilities. How much does he suspect? Hard to say. He knows the fight wasn't luck, but he might just think I have some natural talent rather than formal training. Recommendations? Sarah thought carefully before responding. Let me give them another demonstration, but a controlled one. I can show enough skill to satisfy their curiosity while keeping the really advanced stuff hidden. Negative. Too risky. Sir, they're already suspicious. If I refuse to cooperate, it'll just make things worse. At least this way I can control what they see. There was a long pause. Very well, but Sparrow, if this goes sideways, you're on your own until we can arrange extraction. Understood. Sparrow out. Sarah spent the next hour reviewing everything she knew about Federation combat doctrine and military capabilities. If she was going to perform for an audience of intelligence professionals, she needed to give them exactly what they expected to see, nothing more and nothing less. The demonstration was arranged for the following day in the Academy's main combat facility. Word had spread despite efforts to keep it quiet, and a small crowd of students and faculty had gathered to watch. Sarah's opponent this time was Lieutenant Zekmar, a Saurian officer who served as an instructor for advanced combat courses. Unlike Vextar, who relied primarily on brute strength, Zekmar was known for his speed and tactical thinking. Standard sparring rules, Dr. Calaxis announced. The match ends when one participant yields or is rendered unable to continue. Sarah nodded and took her position in the center of the combat ring. This time she was facing someone who knew exactly what to look for. Zekmar had studied the recording of her fight with Vextar and would be prepared for her techniques. Ready when you are, Miss Chen, the Saurian said, his forked tongue flicking nervously as he assessed her stance. Sarah had chosen to present herself differently this time. Instead of the relaxed, almost casual posture she had used against Vextar, she adopted a more conventional fighting stance. Something that would suggest training without revealing the extent of her capabilities. Zekmar circled her carefully, his reptilian features focused and alert. Unlike Vextar's direct assault, he probed her defenses with quick jabs and feints, testing her reactions. Sarah responded with basic defensive techniques that any competent fighter might know. She blocked and parried rather than using the advanced evasion techniques that had made her previous victory so impressive. For several minutes, they exchanged attacks and counters in what appeared to be a relatively even match. Sarah allowed Zekmar to land a few minor hits, selling the idea that she was struggling against a more experienced opponent. Commander Thaxion watched intently from the sidelines, his analytical mind cataloging every movement and technique. This fight was very different from the previous one. Sarah was showing skill, but nothing that couldn't be explained by natural talent and some basic training. When Sarah finally won, it was through a conventional takedown that any martial arts student might have managed with enough practice. She caught Zekmar off balance during an aggressive attack and used his momentum against him, pinning him to the mat with a hold that was textbook but effective. "Yield!" the Saurian gasped, and Sarah immediately released him. The watching crowd applauded politely, but there was none of the shocked amazement that had followed her victory over Vextar. This had been a good fight between two competent opponents, nothing more. "Interesting," Dr. Calaxis commented as Sarah helped Zekmar to his feet. "Your technique today was much more conventional than your previous demonstration." "I had time to think about it," Sarah replied. "Against Vextar, I panicked and just tried whatever came to mind. Today, I tried to fight more systematically." It was a plausible explanation. The difference between desperate improvisation and careful technique could account for the variations in her performance. Commander Thaxion approached as the crowd dispersed. "Well done, Miss Chen. You've clearly been practicing." "A little," Sarah admitted. "After what happened with Vextar, I thought I should learn some proper fighting techniques. Lieutenant Zekmar was kind enough to give me some pointers." "Indeed." Thaxion studied her face carefully. "Tell me, do you plan to continue your combat training?" "Maybe. It's kind of fun, and it's good exercise." "I see. Well, you show promise. If you're interested, I could arrange for some additional instruction while I'm here at the academy." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The offer sounded innocent, but she recognized it for what it was, an opportunity for Thaxion to observe her more closely and test the limits of her abilities. "That's very generous," she said carefully, "but I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'm sure you have important things to do." "Not at all. I find human capabilities quite fascinating. It would be my pleasure." There was no polite way to refuse without raising more suspicion. Sarah forced herself to smile and nod. "In that case, I'd be honored to learn from you, Commander." "Excellent. We'll start tomorrow." As Sarah walked back to her dormitory, she reflected on how quickly her situation was deteriorating. What had started as a simple cover identity was becoming increasingly complex. She was now committed to training sessions with a Federation intelligence officer who suspected she was more than she appeared. Her communicator chimed softly with an incoming message. The text was brief. "Package arriving tomorrow. Standard delivery protocols." Sarah smiled grimly. Backup was coming, though she hoped she wouldn't need it. Earth's intelligence services had clearly decided that her mission was too important to risk losing. The next morning brought a new student to the academy. Marcus Webb appeared to be another unremarkable human exchange student, complete with the slightly overwhelmed expression common to newcomers from Earth. Sarah recognized him immediately, though she gave no sign of it. Marcus was one of Earth's most experienced intelligence operatives, and his presence meant that Control was taking the situation very seriously indeed. She would have to be careful about how she interacted with him. Any sign of familiarity would raise questions she couldn't answer. During lunch break, Marcus approached her table in the cafeteria with the nervous enthusiasm of a new student seeking friendly faces. "Excuse me," he said in slightly accented Standard Galactic. "I heard there was another human here. I'm Marcus Webb, just arrived from Earth yesterday." "Sarah Chen," she replied with a welcoming smile. "Please sit down. It's nice to meet another human. As he settled into his chair, Marcus managed to brush against her hand while reaching for his water glass. The brief contact allowed him to pass her a small data chip, invisible to any watching eyes. "This place is incredible," Marcus said, his voice carrying genuine wonder as he looked around the diverse cafeteria. "I can't believe I'm actually here." "It takes some getting used to," Sarah agreed. "Where are you from on Earth?" "New York. My family runs a small shipping business. Nothing too exciting." The cover story was simple and believable. Over the next few minutes, they exchanged the kind of small talk that any two humans meeting for the first time might share. To outside observers, it looked like nothing more than a friendly introduction. But Sarah was listening carefully to the subtle cues in Marcus's conversation. He was telling her that extraction assets were in place if needed, that her mission remained active, and that Earth's government was very interested in whatever intelligence she could gather about Federation military capabilities. When Commander Thaxion appeared at their table, Marcus looked up with the appropriate mixture of nervousness and awe. "Commander," Sarah said with surprise that was only partially feigned, "I'd like you to meet Marcus Webb. He just arrived from Earth yesterday." "Another human?" Thaxion observed, his amber eyes studying Marcus carefully. "How fortuitous. Tell me, Mr. Webb, what brings you to Nexus Prime Academy?" "Engineering studies, sir," Marcus replied with exactly the right amount of deference. "I'm hoping to learn about fusion reactor design. Earth's technology is still pretty primitive compared to Federation standards." "Indeed. And what do you know about Miss Chen's recent accomplishments?" Marcus looked puzzled. "Accomplishments? I just met her a few minutes ago. She has shown some unexpected talents in combat training. Quite impressive for someone from a supposedly peaceful agricultural world." "Combat training?" Marcus turned to Sarah with apparent surprise. "You never mentioned you knew how to fight." "It's nothing special," Sarah said with embarrassment that was only slightly exaggerated. "I got lucky in a sparring match. The commander is making it sound more impressive than it was. Perhaps Mr. Webb would like to observe our training session this afternoon," Thaxion suggested. "He might find it educational to see what humans are capable of achieving with proper instruction." Sarah felt trapped. Having Marcus observe her training session would give him valuable intelligence about Federation interest in human capabilities, but it would also put him at risk of exposure if Thaxion became too suspicious. "I'd love to watch," Marcus said with enthusiasm. "I've never seen real alien combat techniques." "Excellent. The session begins at 1400 hours in Training Facility 7. After Thaxion left, Marcus leaned closer to Sarah with the conspiratorial manner of a new student seeking insider information. "So, you really know how to fight?" he asked quietly. "A little," Sarah admitted. "But the commander thinks there's more to it than there really is. He keeps asking questions about Earth and human capabilities." "What kind of questions?" "Military stuff, mostly. How widespread combat training is on Earth. What other abilities humans might have. It's like he's worried we're hiding something." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe we are, in a way. Earth has always been pretty secretive about our military capabilities, even with the Federation." It was a clever response that acknowledged the truth while maintaining his cover. Sarah filed the information away for later analysis. The afternoon training session was unlike anything Sarah had experienced before. Commander Thaxion had arranged for several different opponents, each representing a different Federation species and fighting style. "Today we will explore the range of Miss Chen's abilities," he announced to the small audience that had gathered. "Mr. Webb will observe how humans adapt to diverse combat challenges." Sarah's first opponent was another Saurian, this one specializing in rapid strike techniques. Her second was an Aquarian whose fluid movements and environmental advantages made for a completely different kind of fight. The third was a Zephyrian who relied on telepathic prediction of opponent moves. Each fight was carefully monitored and recorded, with Thaxion making notes throughout. Sarah found herself walking a tightrope, demonstrating enough skill to justify the attention while hiding the full extent of her training. Against the Saurian, she used conventional boxing techniques mixed with basic grappling. Against the Aquarian, she adapted to the water-filled environment by focusing on leverage and timing rather than strength. Against the Zephyrian, she relied on unpredictable movement patterns that made telepathic prediction more difficult. Marcus watched from the sidelines with apparent fascination, asking occasional questions about technique and strategy that any curious observer might pose. But Sarah could see him cataloging information about Federation combat doctrine and training methods. "Remarkable," Thaxion commented after the final match. "Miss Chen, your ability to adapt to different opponents is quite impressive. Most species tend to rely on their natural advantages and struggle when facing unfamiliar fighting styles." "Humans are pretty adaptable," Sarah said with a shrug. "We've had to be, coming from a world with so many different environments and threats." "Yes, Earth is noted for its unusual diversity. Tell me, are such adaptability and learning speed common among your species?" The question was the one Sarah had been dreading. Thaxion was clearly trying to assess whether she represented typical human capability or was an outlier. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I've never really thought about it. Most humans I know are pretty good at figuring things out when they need to." "Interesting. Mr. Webb, what's your assessment? Does Miss Chen's performance seem typical for your species?" Marcus looked thoughtful, playing his role perfectly. "Sarah's always been athletic back on Earth, but I have to admit, this is beyond anything I've seen before. Then again, I'm from New York. We don't get much opportunity for this kind of training." Of course, urban versus rural upbringing could account for significant differences in physical development. Sarah breathed a small sigh of relief. Marcus had provided a plausible explanation for her abilities while suggesting they weren't necessarily representative of all humans. But as the session ended, she noticed Thaxion making additional notes and speaking quietly into a communication device. Whatever he was reporting, it was clearly important enough to require immediate attention. That evening, Sarah found an opportunity to speak privately with Marcus in one of the Academy's study areas. "How bad is the situation?" Marcus asked quietly, their conversation hidden by the ambient noise of studying students. "Worse than I initially reported," Sarah admitted. "Thaxion isn't just curious about human capabilities. I think he's conducting a formal intelligence assessment." "For what purpose?" "Unknown. But if the Federation starts taking Earth seriously as a potential threat, it could change everything." Marcus nodded grimly. "Control is aware of the implications. They want you to maintain cover as long as possible, but they're prepared to extract you if necessary. And lose 3 years of intelligence gathering? That would be a disaster. Better than losing our best operative in Federation space." Before Sarah could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Calaxis, whose optical sensors immediately focused on their conversation. "Miss Chen, Mr. Webb," the professor said in greeting. "I trust you're finding the evening productive?" "Very much so," Sarah replied smoothly. "Marcus was just telling me about Earth's educational system. It's interesting to compare our experiences." "Indeed. Mr. Webb, I understand you observed today's training session. What were your impressions?" "Incredible," Marcus said with genuine enthusiasm. "I had no idea humans could learn combat techniques so quickly. Sarah made it look easy." "Yes, her progress has been remarkable. Tell me, do you have any fighting experience yourself?" It was a test, Sarah realized. Dr. Calaxis was checking to see if Marcus displayed similar capabilities. "Me? No way," Marcus laughed. "I can barely manage to avoid tripping over my own feet. Sarah's always been the athletic one in our..." In our group back home. The slight hesitation was perfect, suggesting a personal relationship without being specific about it. I see. Well, perhaps you might consider some basic training while you're here. The Academy offers excellent programs for students of all skill levels. Maybe, Marcus said uncertainly. Though after watching Sarah today, I think I'd probably just embarrass myself. Dr. Calaxis departed with what might have been the electronic equivalent of amusement, leaving Sarah and Marcus to continue their conversation. He was testing you, Sarah observed quietly. I figured. How did I do? Perfect. You came across as exactly what your cover identity suggests. An ordinary human with no special training. Good. Because I have a feeling we're going to need every advantage we can get. Sarah looked around the study area, noting the various alien species absorbed in their academic work. To them, humans were still primitive newcomers to galactic civilization. If they knew the truth about Earth's rapidly advancing military capabilities and intelligence operations, the entire balance of power in the galaxy might shift. Her mission was more important than ever. The information she could gather here might determine whether humanity's integration into galactic civilization proceeded peacefully or ended in conflict. But first, she had to survive the increasingly intense scrutiny from Federation intelligence without revealing more than she could afford to lose. The breakthrough came 3 days later, though not in the way Sarah had expected. She was reviewing stellar navigation charts in the Academy's main library when her communicator vibrated with an emergency signal. The message was brief but urgent. Nexus under attack. Multiple hostiles inbound. All students report to emergency shelters immediately. Around her, the library erupted into controlled chaos as students from dozens of species moved toward designated safe areas. Sarah gathered her materials and joined the flow, but her training was already analyzing the situation. Nexus Prime Academy was located on a heavily defended space station in neutral territory. For attackers to reach this far into Federation space meant either a massive military operation or something had gone very wrong with the early warning systems. As she moved through the corridors, Sarah caught glimpses of the tactical displays showing the station's external view. 3 ships, sleek and angular, were approaching from different vectors. Their design was unfamiliar, which ruled out most known hostile species. In the emergency shelter, students clustered together according to species, fear overriding the usual academic friendships. Sarah found herself near a group of humans, including Marcus, who had positioned himself where he could observe the entire space. "What's happening?" asked Jenny Martinez, another human exchange student who had arrived the previous semester. "Unknown attackers," replied Dr. Calaxis, who was coordinating shelter operations. "The station's defenses are engaging, but the enemy ships are using some kind of shield technology we haven't encountered before." Through the shelter's reinforced viewports, they could see energy weapons fire lighting up the darkness of space. The station's defensive systems were powerful, but the attacking ships seemed to absorb or deflect most of the incoming fire. Commander Thaxion appeared at the shelter entrance, his military bearing more pronounced under combat conditions. All students remain calm. The station's marine garrison is prepared for boarding actions if the attackers breach the hull. Sarah caught Marcus's eye and saw her own thoughts reflected there. If hostile forces boarded the station, their carefully maintained cover identities would become irrelevant. Survival would take priority over intelligence gathering. The lights suddenly dimmed as the station's main power grid fluctuated. Emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow that made the diverse group of students look even more alien than usual. "They've damaged the primary reactor," Dr. Calaxis reported, his optical sensors interfacing directly with the station's internal systems. "Switching to backup power." A new voice came over the communication system. speaking accented standard galactic with an electronic distortion that suggested artificial modification. People of the Federation, you have been judged and found wanting. Your corruption of galactic civilization ends today. Surrender the human students, and the rest of you may live. The shelter fell silent. Every eye turned toward the small group of humans huddled together near the back wall. "What do they want with us?" Jenny whispered, her voice barely audible. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Someone knew about Earth's intelligence operations, or had discovered something that made humans specifically valuable. Or this was part of a larger plot against Federation-Earth relations. Commander Thaxion stepped forward, his amber eyes hard with determination. "No one will be surrendering anyone. The Federation protects all its citizens." But Sarah could see doubt in the faces around her. Several alien students were looking at the humans with expressions that suggested they were calculating whether trading a few humans for everyone's safety might be acceptable. The station shuddered as another weapon strike found its target. Somewhere in the distance, they could hear the hiss of atmospheric sealing systems engaging as hull breaches were contained. "All Marine units to Docking Bay 7, came another announcement. "We have boarders." The fighting had moved inside the station. Sarah knew from her intelligence briefings that Nexus Prime's Marine garrison was well-trained and well-equipped, but they were facing an unknown enemy with unknown capabilities. Marcus leaned closer to her, his voice barely a whisper. "If they're specifically after humans, this isn't random." Sarah nodded slightly. Someone had either discovered their real identities or had other reasons for targeting Earth's representatives. Either way, the situation had just become far more complex. Dr. Calaxis was monitoring communications from the combat zones. "The boarders are using personal energy shields and advanced weaponry. Our Marines are taking heavy casualties." "How many attackers?" Thaxion demanded. "Unknown. They appear to be cybernetically enhanced humanoids of some kind, extremely fast and well-coordinated." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Cybernetically enhanced humanoids using unknown technology, specifically targeting humans. This had all the hallmarks of a black operations mission. The question was, black ops by whom? The answer came sooner than expected. The shelter's main entrance suddenly exploded inward, filling the space with smoke and debris. As the dust cleared, figures in advanced combat armor moved through the breach. Sarah counted 6 attackers, each wearing full-body armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their faces were hidden behind featureless helmets, and they carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. "Humans," the lead figure said in that same electronically distorted voice they had heard over the communications. "Come forward now, and no one else needs to die." Commander Thaxion stepped between the attackers and the students, his hand moving to his sidearm. "I said no one is being surrendered." The lead attacker's weapon whined as it powered up. "Your choice." What happened next took place in the span of seconds, but Sarah's enhanced reflexes allowed her to process every detail. Thaxion drew his weapon and fired in one smooth motion. The energy bolt struck the lead attacker's center mass and simply vanished, absorbed by some kind of personal shielding system. The attacker's return shot took Thaxion in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into a bank of emergency equipment. Dr. Calaxis moved to engage, his Nexari combat systems activating with mechanical precision. His built-in energy weapons emerged from concealed housing in his arms, firing rapid pulses at the nearest attacker. Again, the shots were absorbed or deflected harmlessly. Other students screamed and dove for cover as the attackers advanced into the shelter. Their movements were inhumanly fast and coordinated, suggesting either cybernetic enhancement or some kind of shared tactical network. Sarah found herself facing a decision that would define the rest of her life. She could maintain her cover, huddle with the other humans, and hoped the attacker's true purpose became clear before anyone was killed. Or she could act. The choice was made when one of the attackers grabbed Jenny Martinez and began dragging her toward the entrance. The young woman's terrified screams cut through Sarah like a knife. Sarah moved. Her first priority was distance and positioning. She rolled away from the other humans, drawing the attacker's attention away from the group and giving herself room to maneuver. The nearest attacker turned toward her, weapon rising, but Sarah was already moving again. This time, she wasn't holding back. Sarah's enhanced speed and combat training had been designed specifically for situations like this. She closed the distance to her target in a blur of motion that even the cybernetically enhanced attackers struggled to track. Her first strike targeted the weak point where the attacker's helmet connected to the neck armor. The blow was precisely calculated to disrupt the armor's power systems without killing the occupant. The attacker's personal shields flickered and died. Sarah's second strike, a nerve pressure point attack to the neck, sent her target crashing to the ground unconscious. The remaining 5 attackers immediately shifted their focus to her, recognizing the primary threat. Energy weapons whined as they targeted her position, but Sarah was no longer there. She had learned from studying dozens of alien combat techniques, but her training went far beyond what any academy class could provide. Earth's intelligence services had given her access to combat methods developed specifically for fighting technologically superior opponents. The key was to never be where the enemy expected you to be and to turn their advantages into weaknesses. Sarah used the shelter's equipment and furniture as cover, moving in patterns that forced the attackers to risk hitting each other if they fired. Their advanced targeting systems became a liability when their target refused to stay in one place long enough to acquire a lock. Marcus, seeing Sarah's actions, made his own decision. His cover as a nervous engineering student evaporated as he produced a small device from his clothing and activated it. The device was an electromagnetic pulse generator designed to disrupt electronic systems at close range. The pulse swept through the shelter, causing the attacker's armor systems to flicker and fail. Without their technological advantages, the attackers were revealed as what they really were: human beings wearing advanced equipment. Earth Special Forces? Sarah realized with shock. These weren't aliens or unknown hostiles. They were humans, using technology far beyond what Earth was supposed to possess. The lead attacker, his helmet's voice modulation system now offline, spoke in unaccented English. Sarah Chen, operative designation Sparrow. You are to come with us immediately. Like hell, Sarah replied, also switching to English. She recognized the tactical situation now. This wasn't an attack on the academy. It was an extraction operation designed to remove her and possibly other Earth intelligence assets before their covers could be completely blown. But something had gone wrong. Earth's special forces weren't supposed to be fighting Federation personnel, and they certainly weren't supposed to be using technology that would reveal Earth's true military capabilities. Stand down, Sparrow, the operative commanded. Orders from control. Your mission is compromised. My mission is ongoing, Sarah replied firmly, and this operation is compromising a lot more than just me. Around them, the shelter's occupants were staring in shock and confusion. Humans fighting other humans, speaking a language most of them didn't understand, using technology that supposedly didn't exist. Commander Thaxion, wounded but still conscious, was recording everything on his personal combat recorder. Dr. Calaxis's optical sensors were undoubtedly analyzing and storing every detail. Sarah realized with growing horror that this botched extraction attempt had just revealed more about Earth's capabilities than 3 years of careful intelligence work could have discovered. You need to leave, she said urgently. Now, before you make this worse than it already is. Negative. You're coming with us. I'm not going anywhere. The standoff was broken by the arrival of Federation Marines, who had fought their way through the station to reach the shelter. They burst through secondary entrances, weapons ready, only to find a scene that defied easy explanation. Humans fighting other humans, alien students cowering in terror. Technology that shouldn't exist, being used by people who were supposed to be primitive newcomers to galactic civilization. "Drop your weapons," the Marine commander ordered in standard galactic. The Earth operatives, realizing their situation was hopeless, began a fighting retreat toward the main entrance. But they were now outnumbered and had lost the element of surprise. Sarah found herself caught in the middle, no longer able to maintain any kind of cover identity. Every action she took, every word she spoke, would be analyzed and recorded by Federation intelligence. She made a choice that surprised everyone, including herself. "Commander," she called to the Marine officer, speaking in standard galactic, "I can help you capture them." It was a betrayal of her own people, but Sarah had realized something crucial. The Earth operatives' mission was already compromised beyond any hope of recovery. Their clumsy extraction attempt had revealed far too much about Earth's real capabilities. The only way to limit the damage was to control the narrative. Working with the Federation Marines, Sarah used her knowledge of the operatives' likely tactics to predict their movements. Within minutes, all 6 attackers were captured, their advanced equipment seized as evidence. In the aftermath, as medical teams treated the wounded and security forces secured the station, Sarah found herself facing Commander Thaxion in a private briefing room. "So," the Altarian said, his shoulder bandaged but his eyes as sharp as ever, "shall we dispense with the fiction that you're an agricultural student?" "I suppose there's no point in maintaining that cover anymore," Sarah admitted. "Indeed. The question is, what exactly are you, and what does Earth really want?" Sarah looked at the recording devices she knew were monitoring every word and gesture. Whatever she said next would determine how the Federation viewed humanity for generations to come. "I'm an intelligence operative," she said simply. "My mission was to assess Federation military capabilities and determine whether Earth faced any threats from galactic civilization." "And your conclusion?" "That the Federation is exactly what it claims to be, a peaceful alliance of species working together for mutual benefit. Earth has nothing to fear from you." It was the truth, though not the complete truth. Sarah's 3 years of observation had indeed convinced her that the Federation posed no direct threat to Earth. But she wasn't mentioning the detailed intelligence she had gathered about Federation military doctrine, technology, and strategic capabilities. "The operatives who attacked the station," Thaxion pressed. "They were using technology far beyond what Earth is supposed to possess." "How do you explain that?" "Earth's military development has been faster than we've publicly acknowledged," Sarah admitted. "When you're the newcomer to galactic civilization, it's wise to be cautious about revealing your full capabilities too quickly." "How cautious?" Sarah smiled slightly. "Commander, humans have been preparing for first contact scenarios for over a century. When the Federation finally made contact, we were much more ready than we let on." Thaxion leaned back in his chair, processing the implications. "You're saying that Earth has been deliberately underplaying its technological and military development. I'm saying that humans learn fast, adapt quickly, and are very good at preparing for unexpected situations. The attack today was carried out by Special Forces operators using equipment that represents our current military capabilities, not the level we had when we first joined the Federation." "And what level is that?" Sarah met his eyes directly. "Sufficient to defend ourselves if necessary, but not threatening to established galactic powers. Earth wants to be a good member of the Federation, not a conquest force." It was a carefully crafted message designed to acknowledge Earth's hidden strength, while reassuring the Federation that humanity's intentions remained peaceful. Over the next several hours, Sarah underwent the most intensive debriefing of her career. Federation intelligence officers, legal experts, and diplomatic representatives all wanted to understand exactly what had happened and what it meant for Earth Federation relations. Sarah walked a careful line between honesty and discretion. She revealed enough about Earth's capabilities to explain the day's events, while concealing operational details that could compromise other human assets or Earth's strategic position. Marcus, when questioned separately, supported her narrative while maintaining his own cover story. He claimed to be a low-level intelligence analyst whose only role had been to provide support if Sarah's mission was discovered. The captured Earth operatives refused to speak at all, invoking some kind of military protocol that required Federation authorities to deal with Earth's government directly for any further information. When the formal proceedings finally ended, Sarah found herself in an unexpected position. Her original mission was clearly over, but the Federation was offering her a new role. Earth has proven that its people possess remarkable capabilities, Dr. Calaxis explained during their final private conversation. The Academy would be honored to have you continue your studies here, this time as an acknowledged expert in human military doctrine. You want me to teach? We want to learn. Today's events have shown us that humanity has much to offer galactic civilization. Your knowledge of both human and alien capabilities makes you uniquely qualified to help bridge our understanding. It was an attractive offer, but Sarah knew she needed to consult with her superiors on Earth before making any commitments. I'll need to discuss this with my government, she said diplomatically. Of course, take all the time you need. That evening, Sarah used her communicator for what she knew would be her final transmission as an undercover operative. Control, this is Sparrow. Mission status, blown but salvaged. Report. Cover identity is completely compromised, but I've established new parameters for Earth Federation relations. The Federation now knows we're more capable than we initially let on, but they believe our intentions remain peaceful. Assessment of Federation response? Curiosity rather than hostility. They want to understand our capabilities, not neutralize them. The situation is manageable if we handle it correctly. Recommendations? Sarah thought carefully before responding. End the intelligence gathering phase and begin open collaboration. The Federation has proven they can be trusted with partial truth about our capabilities. Complete honesty might actually serve our interests better than continued deception. Understood. Sparrow, your service has been exemplary. Whatever you decide about your future, Earth owes you a debt of gratitude. Just doing my job, Control. Sparrow out. As Sarah deactivated her communicator for the last time, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in a single day. She had begun the morning as a hidden operative gathering intelligence on potential enemies. She was ending it as Earth's first official representative to the Federation military community. The galaxy suddenly seemed full of new possibilities. 6 months later, Sarah stood before a mixed class of human and alien students in the Academy's Advanced Combat Theory classroom. Her official title was Instructor of Interspecies Military Doctrine, and she was teaching the first-ever course on human fighting techniques. Human combat philosophy is based on adaptability and creative thinking, she explained to the fascinated students. When you can't match your opponent's natural advantages, you find ways to turn those advantages into weaknesses. In the front row, Vexitar raised his massive hand. The Corvan warrior had become one of her most dedicated students, eager to understand the techniques that had defeated him so dramatically. Instructor Chen, he asked with genuine respect, how do humans develop such diverse fighting skills without natural advantages like strength or speed? Sarah smiled, remembering her own nervousness the first time she had faced him in combat. Because we have to, Vextar. When your species is smaller and weaker than most others in the galaxy, you learn to be smarter and faster than everyone else. And this adaptability is common among humans? Every human learns to adapt from childhood. We have to survive on a world with thousands of different environments, predators, and challenges. By the time we reach adulthood, flexibility and creative problem-solving are second nature. Commander Thaxion, who often observed her classes, nodded approvingly from the back of the room. Which explains how Earth managed to develop advanced military technology so quickly after contact. Exactly. Humans have been preparing for the unknown our entire evolutionary history. First contact was just another challenge to adapt to. After class, Sarah found herself walking through the same corridors where she had once moved invisibly as an undercover operative. Now students nodded respectfully as she passed, and faculty members sought her opinions on interspecies relations. Her transformation from hidden spy to respected instructor had been surprisingly easy. The Federation seemed genuinely grateful to understand human capabilities better. And Earth had benefited enormously from the open exchange of technology and knowledge. The botched extraction attempt that had seemed like a disaster at the time had actually opened doors to cooperation that might have taken decades to achieve through traditional diplomatic channels. Marcus had accepted a similar position in the engineering department, where he was helping Federation scientists understand human approaches to technological innovation. The rest of Earth's intelligence assets in Federation space had been quietly recalled and replaced with official diplomatic and academic personnel. As Sarah reached her private quarters, she reflected on how much her life had changed since that morning when Vexitar had first challenged her to a fight. She had gone from hiding her abilities to teaching them, from gathering intelligence to sharing it, from pretending to be unremarkable to helping define humanity's place in galactic civilization. The human students arriving at the academy were no longer hiding their capabilities. They came openly as representatives of a species that had proven itself worthy of respect and partnership. Earth was no longer the primitive newcomer desperately trying to understand galactic civilization. Humanity had established itself as a valuable member of the Federation, contributing unique perspectives and capabilities that benefited everyone. And Sarah, who had once been just another classmate that no one noticed, had become the bridge between two civilizations, learning to work together as partners rather than suspicious strangers. Looking back, she realized that her greatest success hadn't been in maintaining her cover or gathering intelligence. It had been in recognizing when the time had come to stop hiding and start building something better. The galaxy was a much more interesting place when humans stopped pretending to be less than they were and started showing what they could really accomplish when they put their minds to it. As Sarah prepared for sleep in her comfortable faculty quarters, she smiled at the irony. She had spent 3 years trying to remain invisible and unremarkable. Now her greatest achievement was in showing the galaxy exactly what humans were capable of when they stopped holding back. Tomorrow she would teach another class of eager students, both human and alien, about the art of turning disadvantages into advantages and weaknesses into strengths. It was a lesson that applied to much more than just combat. It was, Sarah had learned, the essence of what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of wonders and possibilities.